I think, I think not just the discerning Guyanese, but all Guyanese would see a very apparent trend in the coalition's psyche and in their public pronouncements. So somehow they have moved from criticizing several projects under the PPP when we were in office to a period of neutrality and now a warm embrace of those projects. And in the last few, maybe the past year, that warm embrace has morphed into claiming that these projects originated with them and claiming credit for the projects. So we've seen this with the Hope Canal, the airport, the East Coast Road, the Marriott, Movie Town, Sheriff Street, rehabilitation. I can name a large number of projects. The ICT project, 17 million US project, etc. But the most apparent one must be the oil and gas sector. And so we in the People's Progressive Party, we're extremely pleased with First Oil, that we've started producing oil in Guyana. This represents an enormous opportunity, if used well, for development and for addressing the concerns of our people. However, this path to the production of first oil has been a very difficult one, and it did not happen because of wishful thinking. It did not happen because of wishful thinking. It represented hard work by many people. And I want to publicly acknowledge all of the people who were involved for decades, and to thank them for the work they've put in and their persistence in ensuring that we arrive at such a day. And so even the Chronicle, in a very rare display of nonpartisan reporting, outlined the long history to First Oil. And it pointed out the difficulties we've had even after Janet Jagan signed that agreement in 1999. What took place thereafter with the CGX issue and the force majeure that Exxon and the others declared, those who were in charge of that block at that time, and that it was only in 2008 that we had the lifting of the force majeure and the resumption of exploration activities. It all got delayed because of the CGX issue. But we were not sitting around idly in that period. We were trying to resolve that matter, and we resolved it definitively. We went to the, under the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, we took our case there, and we had a favorable ruling. And we had a border demarcated, a border settled. And it was for nearly a century that we've had, less than a century, but for a very long period, that we've had another internationally settled border issue by a tribunal. And so this, even when the announcement, a lot of people worked consistently to ensure that Exxon started the exploration technical people as well as from the political sphere. And even when Exxon discovered oil, and there was the vibe about it in the air just before the last elections, days before, Mr. Bulkan, who is now a minister in the coalition government, expressed the view of the coalition at that time by saying it was a political gimmick by the People's Progressive Party. That was his word, a political gimmick by the PPP to declare that Guyana found oil. So from declaring it a political gimmick under the PPP in 2015 to now this warm embrace and almost a claim that APNU is responsible for forest oil, it's a far stretch. But as I said before, this is not strange in the psyche of this cabal that we have. But what most Guyanese are concerned about is that they've had 5 years from the discovery of oil, almost 5 years, to the production of forest oil to put in place the arrangements to properly manage the sector. And until now, they have failed in that regard. They have failed miserably in that regard. They failed when they renegotiated the contract and did not look out for our interests in Guyana. That was the first big blunder / corruption of the government. They failed when they secretly collected $18 million as a signing bonus without giving a reason why it had to be 18 million, because they asked for 18 million, somebody said, because that is what it will cost to take care of the Venezuela, the legal fees for the Venezuela border issue before the World Court. That's not how you negotiate. You ask for a maximum sum. They failed to give a credible explanation on that issue. They failed to, until today, to explain why they kept the money outside of the consolidated fund for 3 years. They failed to explain until now how much money was drawn down. And so we don't know what was the total sum that was paid over after court case filed by the PPP to the consolidated fund in earlier this year. We don't know what sum was handed over to the consolidated fund. They failed to put, in spite of all the international technical assistance from the Commonwealth, from the IDB, from the World Bank, from every source under the sun, they failed to put together a credible sovereign wealth fund, although they promised it several times, and they only passed the version that they have, which is a political version of a sovereign wealth fund, after the no confidence vote. So its legality is questionable, and we've made it clear that we'd have to repeal and reenact, but on different principles, on the principles of keeping the politicians at arm's length away from the fund, unlike what is enshrined in the current model where the Minister of Finance now dominates the entire fund. They failed on the regulatory body. They have not put together an independent petroleum commission to regulate the sector, to see that these oil companies keep to the contract, that they observe faithfully the contracts signed. And now it's all left to a mediocre Department of Energy, staffed by someone who has headed by someone who has no experience in the sector, with a slew of foreign consultants, many of them who have a link to the oil industry itself, and the president himself assuming the role as the Minister of the Petroleum, and he has not read the contract until now. So they failed on that. They failed on local content policy. Until now, we don't have a local content policy to protect Guyanese, to give jobs to Guyanese, to make sure that Exxon doesn't bring water from California or doesn't bring plants from abroad to landscape their buildings, that the Guyanese can do these things too, that we don't get paid $72,000 gross Guyana dollars when the foreigner gets in the same sector doing the same thing, gets 10,000 US dollars. They fail on that too. They fail even recently on their first oil. We haven't got this oil as yet, the 3 million barrels. It may be available till after March, after the elections, but they're also tied up through an arrangement that they claim had the blessings of the World Bank. That imagine that. When a government says, we had the blessings of the World Bank to handpick who we wanted for this sector. This is ceding sovereignty. It's like the World Bank is running our country. We didn't elect the president of the World Bank to run our country. We didn't vote for him. But it's almost it makes me really upset that we pander so much. You know, once we mention the World Bank name, suddenly that is imprimatur to do anything, including breaching our procurement laws. The World Bank can direct that we breach the procurement laws, and I'm happy that the Auditor General said that he's looking into this matter. And today, up to today, I saw them saying, oh, the World Bank would help with our capacity building. They borrowed 20 million US dollars for capacity building. And guess what capacity they're building? Half of this money is spent on foreign consultants coming in here. I thought at least a part of it, maybe half of it, would be on sending our people abroad to study or for training, etc. They're spending it on foreign consultants again, and who will come here, and many are linked to the oil companies and tell us what to do through corrupt arrangements. They failed totally, but look at the big PR about it. Nagamutu says forced oil will take us out of economic bondage. That's Nagamutu. And in the same article, he says, since resigning from the PPP, he has met and embraced young, visionary, and committed leaders in the coalition. Is this guy for real? He has met young, visionary leaders in the coalition. That coalition, he's talking about Granger and Carl Carnage and the others. And that it would be on their shoulders to take Guyana forward. Then Basil Williams, forced oil brings new hope to Guyana. New hope to Guyana. After failing us, Sidney Allicock says, Guyana becoming a petroleum producer, a dream come true. It's not a dream, it's hard work, none of which your government did. And it's a dream come true. And he sat in Parliament when Keith Scott said that if Amerindian got more land, they can't benefit from the proceeds of the oil and gas industry. This is Sidney Allicock for you. And then Granger proclaims, in his usual style, his proclamation of a National Petroleum Day and his decade of development. Pure nonsense again. Without any reality as to his failing, understanding that he has failed Guyana. So it brings me back to what I started off with, that they take credit for everything. They take credit for all of these issues, and they, without putting in the work, they think that it gets there because a dream is coming true, or it happens in the magical world, you know, we're in the Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter world, you know, Hogsworth here in Guyana. This is this grouping here. Things don't happen by magic. You have to work towards it. So I'll come back in a moment to some of the other things they're saying. But in the same vein, in the same vein of taking credit for everything under the sun that you didn't work on. So I saw the big statement for the Chronicle and the big PR thing again. Norway releases 9.1 final payment for Guyana. And this was published on the 23rd of December 2019. And it's a glowing tribute of how well they did. But you recall that this is a PPP program, that we signed this agreement, that they received $200 million at the beginning, about $200 million, through this agreement. This was the final tranche to be released. So some time ago, in fact, the AFC particularly wrote the Norwegian and said that they should not, when they were in opposition, they should not accede to this agreement with Guyana and should not give Guyana any money under the Norwegian fund. That was the AFC, a letter signed by a large number of AFC leaders and some others. I still have that letter. And so today, they're taking credit for it. It's something that they did not work for, not put in a single day of work, but they're taking credit for it. And they're selling this now as, look, Norway released all of this money to us, and it's the 23rd of December 2019. So Norway must have confidence in our government, that the PPP is saying the international community has lost confidence in the government, therefore this has to be a vote of confidence. Well, go to the Starbuck News article of October 13, 2019, because this announcement was made before, when the minister returned from New York, the General Assembly meeting. The announcement was made, they just recycled the announcement on December and took credit for it. And this is what was said by Mr. Frederick Farrow, Poor Frederick Farrow. He said, I also believe it was made clear by our minister during the climate summit in New York City that payments will be sanctioned out of the GRIF, that is Guyana Red, an investment fund that we set up, until after the elections have been held and a new government with a mandate from that election is in place. In other words, the money will not be spent until the current situation is resolved. This is what was said. And but they recycled the old story in December 23rd and made it a big thing, a vote of confidence, forgetting that the people released the money to the GRIF. That is a fund managed by the World Bank, but they made it clear that the World Bank cannot release this money to the government of Guyana until after the elections are held. So that was not a vote of confidence. In fact, it was a vote of no confidence in this government. And that is why, but they, in their own word, that's why, first of all, they had nothing to do with the agreement, voted against it, fought against it, now took credit for it, and took the money, they're spending the money liberally that we left, and then try to mislead the Guyanese public on this issue too. So don't you see a pattern here? It's a pattern. They're desperate because they have absolutely no success. They lost 30,000 jobs. The power situation, we have had no resolution. They killed the hydropower. There have been no decision made to solve the electricity generation shortfall. We have heard all sorts of things about wind power, etc., but nothing has materialized. Absolutely no plan. They have sold our interests out on the oil and gas sector. They've increased taxes by $88 billion per year. The cost of living has gone up. Crime has gone up. What is it that they can go to the populace with? What kind of election promise can they go, excepting to take credit for things that they had nothing to do with? And now the big thing is, oh, they can manage oil money better than the PPP because the PPP will steal their money. Well, the thing is that they used to say that too. About 25 to 28 to 35 billion dollars a year was stolen by the PPP. But until now, they can't find a single cent, not a single cent that was transferred or stolen illegally. On the other hand, they have not submitted their statements to the Integrity Commission for several years. And you saw their experience with the first money that came from oil. So we will continue to experience these things. I saw recently, keeping with the same trend now, and this is, I think it's beneath Carl Greenwich, I saw a long letter about accusing, blowing the dog whistle on racism again. And it was, Kaichur News was the target now. Now, there are lots of things that I don't agree with in Kaichur News. In fact, things that I vehemently disagree with. And even on the oil and gas sector. But to accuse the newspaper because they use some examples from Africa or Trinidad and Tobago, a multi-ethnic society, as being racist, then it's a far stretch. And this is when all else fails, this is the fallback to go to racism. So to accuse people of racism. You think that in Africa, you have some of the brightest people in the world. You have great development in Africa. Fantastic development in many countries. I've traveled through those countries. I've traveled through maybe 17, 18 countries in Africa. The story of Africa is often untold. So oil and gas failings have not only been unique to Africa, but to say that because a newspaper uses a couple of examples that they're racist, it's a stretch. Tackle the arguments on their merit. And Trinidad and Tobago, they're right about Trinidad and Tobago too. And this has nothing to do with one government in Trinidad and Tobago. You've had Trinidad and Tobago as a multi-ethnic society. But when they themselves say that their revenue has collapsed by 80% in a period of 5 years because that is state revenue, government revenue, by 80% because of a drop in the oil prices and because of failing resource production, then they themselves are acknowledging the problem that they were too heavily reliant on the sector. And Greenwich now defends that. But they blow the dog whistle. The dog whistle. And that is the dog whistle of racism. So it's a whisper campaigns and stuff. He has done this openly now. This is a fallacy. When we talk about APNU, it is not a failure of Afro-Guyanese in Guyana, because within this government, you have some of the most corrupt Indo-Guyanese and some of them useless ones. You think if I had to compare a Nagamutu with a Samuel Hines, who will I choose from a technical perspective, from the perspective of having intellect and a brain? It's Sam Hines is way above. It's not even a comparison. This one is totally useless. Not because he's Indo-Guyanese, I think, oh, he's a fantastic person. This is not a failure of Afro-Guyanese or anything else. In fact, they've betrayed a lot of the people who work hard to put them there. There are many bright people in APNU who will never get a chance to rise up to the top because of this geriatric cabal. They will never get a chance. So this dog whistle kind of nonsense, it happens every day. And Greenwich is blowing it too. So tackle the story on its merit. If you believe Kaichor News is getting its facts wrong, then deal with it. But I've seen this before, and it starts off in every sector. It starts off with little things. And if we don't point it out, it grows. And that's what happened in the past when they started off with that 400 young Afro-Guyanese who were killed by the PPP, and we didn't tackle it right at the beginning, and then let it grow into a fact based on the rumor machine. It harmed us maybe even in an irreparable way. Now we are trying to fix that. So I find it beneath Carl Greenwich to do this sort of thing. And this charm offensive on oil and gas to the young people again continues. So Mr. Granger, President Granger, talks about he had a youth empowerment summit. Now, in December, you have a youth empowerment summit. Now you're concerned about the young people. When every issue that they've had over the years, you have basically ignored. And so he had this youth empowerment summit hosted by the Youth Forward Movement on the lawns of Watuka Guest House in Linden, where he touted this decade of development. You know Granger and his slogans: 10-point plan, 20-point plan, 30-point plans, decade of development. Nothing to say what he'll do differently. Not a single plan to create jobs or anything else, but a decade of development, as though you can wish it in a dream world. You know, you go to the place where Harry Potter bought his wand, and then you wave it, and you would have a decade of development. So that is it. That is Wizard Granger now. He's the wizard of development. And so, in the same Watuka house, they're buying chandeliers for the Prime Minister room and the President's room. You should see the bill for refurbishment. They didn't tell the young people about the wastage upstairs in that Watuka house that they could have spent on jobs. And to go to Linden and host this is an affront to the people of Linden, whom they've neglected for all the years they've been in office, after announcing the 11-point plan before the elections, and they did not carry out a single one of those 11 points. So no jobs, nothing. In fact, the land in Rung Linden and the surrounding areas are given out to non-Lindeners in large tracts of people when they can't get a house lot. So Granger goes there, he tells the people of Region 10 and the young people how he loves them, decade of development, and they must prepare for a life after oil. So now he's gone after oil now. He's not even talking about the oil and gas sector. This represents aloofness. So the next issue, I see that the coalition has renewed their accord. But we're all hoping to find out precisely what is in this new accord. So I see that the media is just as much in the dark as we are in the opposition. So gone is the big fanfare of the pre-2015 period, when they proudly announced their accord and said that Nagamutu will be responsible for constitutional reform, for chairing the cabinet, for domestic security, for naming people to the boards, etc. Long is that fanfare and the fallacy in that period. We don't know what are the elements of this new accord. So, that's like somebody selling fish or something. The horn out there. So we heard is that they signed something, and then they said they were, and this was the story from Chronicle, that they will strengthen the new pact, will enhance quality of governance, and that they are better together as parties. I thought better together was like our slogan, we are stronger together, but that's for people, not for themselves, better together to steal more. That is what Ramjatan said, we are better together as parties. So I'm still at a loss as to what happened with this new accord. I'm trying to figure out what are outside of this 30, 70 that we seems to be sure about, and that Nagamootoo will be the prime ministerial candidate. I saw some skeptical faces. I'm not sure even sure about that too. So we're still trying to find out what precisely is in this accord and why is it such a state secret if they're signing this accord, and it should be they should start off with the good governance, that since they're strengthening the quality of governance by releasing the accord to everyone so we can see its elements. So I would like to comment on the accord itself, but you can't believe anything that they say, because they were so they can put anything in this accord now. And how can you believe that what Granger wants now is, because he said it all before. They had an accord, they didn't do it, so he's going to promise constitutional reform again, but nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. So it's very hard for us to even address this accord. But it makes no sense to people, because the accord will not focus on how to improve their lives. Any accord, from all the indications we are seeing, is how they secure positions. So which ministries they get, etc. It is splitting up, sharing the spoils of government even before they win the elections. Another issue is that we have seen, we pointed out that there are several people connected to the presidency who were getting large tracts of land. And the reason we wanted to do that is because when you ask the president, he was asked several times about corruption, and he said he doesn't know about any corruption in his government. So I didn't want to go after Patterson's corruption or what Cathy Hughes did in her ministry, or Hastings, not Hastings, Patterson and Ferguson and all of these, because those are in separate ministries. Although he should know, it's so evident to anyone who wants to find out, because you've had reports. So I thought at least he will be interested in what happens to people around him who works for him. So that is why I pointed out how the Eric Phillips matter and the serious issue, because they're all in some way connected to the office. And there's another guy, I forgot his name, Bristol, they're all working for his office. So I pointed out the connection to his office. Now, the MMA also issues leases under his name. And so I would like to hear, but he's very silent on this, and people say, oh, Granger is not corrupt. That is why he can't be oblivious to all of this. So here is the MMA now. The chairman of the board of MMA gets land, 10,609 acres of land. 10,609 acres of land this year. Imagine that's like 50,000 house lots on its own. That's equivalent to 50,000 house lots. So how could your chairman of the MMA board get this when there are hundreds of people who need land at MMA, small farmers, and hundreds of small farmers who have had their lands taken away by MMA, but the chairman of the board gets 10,000 or over 10,000 acres, over 50,000 house lots, the equivalent of 50,000 house lots. But you want to take a wager that Granger will not say a word about it. And we have some additional information about what's happening at the MMA. Another AFC member, an AFC member, got over 400 acres of land there, some taken away from small people. Within a matter of weeks, he flipped it and sold it for $45 million to another person, because I guess he doesn't want to keep it on if the government changes, because then it will probably be reversed. He thinks it's going to be reversed. So he flips it and makes the money already. But this is going on every single day. Every single day, where you saw the pattern of it. Thousands of acres of land everywhere. And we have not even scratched the surface as yet, because I gather that they recently removed the head of not the head of the authority, yes, Mr. Charles, from the authority. So I guess they're clamping down on information. The same thing has happened at Lands and Survey, the same thing at NISA. You can't get information, but all shall be revealed. I'd like to really get the president to comment on this, because he doesn't comment on these issues at all, because it says, I, David Granger, that is the lease, has his name on it. This is the lease here. And then we have Sticky Finger Patterson, acquiring now a large, over 100 acres of land for the bridge. Now, you recall what happened with this whole bridge story. They went to tender, had a large number of bids. They annulled the tender. He then solicited a bid, a proposal that didn't go through any tender process. The National Procurement Board recommended a retender. He ignored them. He solicited a bid, a proposal, took that proposal directly to the cabinet, bypassed the National Procurement Board, had cabinet approve it. Cabinet doesn't have the power of approval. They have a no objection power. Then took it back to the board. Did not tell the board members that we were utilizing the money, and awarded the contract. Now, we heard the award that cabinet gave illegally. He drew down at least the contract, I don't know, the sum drawn down was over $100 million. I don't know who drew it down, but over $100 million above the contract sum. Until now, we can't get answers. We recognize the bridge, the pre-feasibility study. The bridge took a strange turn. It was by Houston, a strange turn, and then ended up on the land of Mr. Stanley Ming across the river. So once the Public Procurement Commission said that it was illegal, basically, illegal, this is the constitutional body, we thought that's the end of the matter. that if you're going to go out, you have to go, and then that feasibility study, the feasibility study was for three lanes, and an opening structure, a structure that opens. So then we heard Jordan went to China and he said, we're building a fixed structure now, high span. So obviously a new feasibility study, because you didn't look at that option in the previous feasibility study, the illegally awarded one. So we move from that quiet. Now suddenly we're hearing months before the elections, he's acquiring land. Now, this is when you name elections, no minister should compulsorily acquire land. That's one. Two, this government has diminished authority because of its caretaker/illegal role. Does not have the authority to acquire land, especially the ministers. Yet he has done so. And it's not necessary, because even if a new government comes in, or even if they were to come back to government, they still have to go through about a year more before you get to the start of the bridge. You have to do another study, and you have to then go out to tender, etc. Why this indecent haste now, 2 months away from the elections, to acquire land that you don't need way into the future? It has to have some element of corruption. It has to have an element of corruption in this. And so we find it very, very strange. And is it for they're acquiring land to give a big payoff to people, or is it that they're doing something else with this land? We don't know, but knowing this government, I wouldn't trust them. So I want to just deal with a couple of issues in no order, in particular order. So I was abroad and I said quite a few things. And so the Ministry of Presidency, I see this one, condemns opposition leaders' spurious utterances during North American outreach. And it's a release from the Ministry of the Presidency. And then it says that the opposition leader said that the Chetwynd Learning Center, named after President Granger's father and located at Lot 5 Turn Drive, Durban, Backlands, Georgetown, is a recipient of state funds. This is the furthest from the truth. Now, today, when this was brought to my attention today, the first time I'm hearing the name Chetwynd Learning Center. I couldn't have mentioned it before, because this is the first time I'm hearing about this. I never mentioned a single thing about President Granger's father, or the Learning Center, or anything of the sort. But this is a release from the presidency. So obviously it's contrived, or they're going mad over there. Or they're going mad. Because it's unbelievable. I never mentioned this stuff. And they said they condemn my utterances in the North American outreach. Not privately nor publicly did I say this. And so something is wrong over there. So then I want to say that we have called on the FIU to investigate. We have had information about a particular minister, Mr. Ramjatan, about an account he has abroad in the Capital One in Valley Stream, New York. And we've heard that a large sum of money has passed through this account, unusually large sum. We don't know if it's true, but it's easy for the FIU to say that you're wrong. And President Granger should ask the FIU to investigate this quickly and then say that based on the FIU information, because we plan to inform the US agencies too, so that if then they can allay the concerns that it may not be true or it's true. So we are calling on the FIU to do an investigation of this. This is what the FIU is set up for, not just to go after to private citizens, but the others. Let me just go through two more issues and then I'll open up the floor. The football, let me just say, I heard, I was watching a news clip from Mr. Wayne Ford, and he was speaking about writing the ministry and not getting word from them about football at the stadium for, I think, New Year's Day. Now, I would urge that this, from what I heard, that this is a standard thing now with this new administration, that they don't allow football at the stadium, or you have to go through, jump through hoops to get the permission. And I want to urge them to ensure that the permission is given for football at the stadium. People used to have that permission in the past. The stadium is not built for cricket alone. It's built for a number of sports, and football is just as important. And therefore, I want to urge those who are in charge to do that, to ensure that they get the permission urgently. They 1 year, no confidence. I was planning to talk a bit about that, but I think it's, I don't think there is much new I could add. The 1 year anniversary of the no confidence vote. It was around the same time that President Granger announced the for soil. And I thought how shameful it is that it's on the anniversary of a no confidence motion that was validly passed, and he defied the Constitution for an entire year, more than a year, and violated the position, the rulings of the courts, etc. And then he still speaks about law and order and the future. And so I just thought that it's very hypocritical. I'll thank you there. I see that Mr. Sober said the Broadcasting Authority operates independently. And any person in Guyana who knows the people there and how they have behaved in the past several months, almost a year now, would understand why I made that statement. You should only look at the letters that were received by Freedom Radio and some other stations that carry more PPP programs. They've all been threatened with sanction or threatened with revocation, now revocation, suspension of their licenses. On the other hand, the state media and those media houses that they see carrying more the government line can get away with murder, including character assassination, with no sanction whatsoever. So this leads me to conclude that the Broadcasting Authority can be part of the independent arbiters for the election period. They cannot be part of as an independent arbiter for the elections. So it's not that we hate anybody there, it's just based on their track record. They've been entirely partisan. The AFC in the weekly columns, I don't even need to talk about that. They continue with this like crazy thing. Like they took a whole section here on their achievements from here to here to talk about the rebuilding rehabilitation of the Otterchong Conference Center. Another PPP project they're taking credit for. Now, look here. And then one laptop per teacher now program. They said in 2016 they gave 8,000 odd. These were laptops that we ordered prior to the elections, 10,000 of them to come in, 2,000 for the hinterland and 8,000 to continue the one laptop per family. They gave out those. Another PPP project. So 2 PPP projects here. And then they want about ICT, how many hubs they have done. 1,500 free computers and 172 community ICT hubs. This is funded from the Norwegian program that we left behind. Almost everything here is like I can trace back to the past. And either they don't know the people who prepare these things, or they're just barefaced, which is the more credible explanation. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Jagdeo, about these 10,000 acres of land leased to Mr. Solly, have you concluded definitively that this is a conflict of interest situation? What is your intelligence telling you, and are you doing anything about it?
I believe it's more than conflict of interest. This can't be just a regular conflict of interest. This has to do, what about the applications of all the small farmers? What about the land that's being taken away from farmers now? Because many of them can't pay the $15,000 per acre fee now that was increased from $3,500. It has to do with a government policy. So you take away from all the small people who can't afford going bankrupt because they can't pay for these lands, and then give it to one crony with 10,000 acres, a large tract of land. As I said before, that's equivalent to 50,000 house lots. Even Eric Phillips only got 2,000, which he denied to at the beginning until the evidence was produced. And 10,000 acres, so it's much more than a conflict of interest. It is a policy of transferring resources to people. A policy of transferring resources to cronies, to either because of their connection, or some of it could be parking of resources for ministers and the others. We believe in other cases, we've seen a lot of that people who are close to them suddenly are getting lots of resources, and we believe they're parking these resources for after the elections.
Okay, and is the city taking any action?
Right now, we can't take much action against this other than expose it. We hope to rectify it after March 2nd. So you can go back to ensuring that people get land, that we have enough land for the 50,000 house lots that we promised, and that the MMA area, we take back the lease fees, the land and the water charges down to 3.5 back again, and we restore the budget to the MMA for farm to market roads and for drainage and irrigation. And so that those small farmers can earn a living too. That's what we want to do.
Okay, and lastly, Ghana's development partner, the World Bank, is encouraging nations to implement some form of the carbon pricing mechanism. Has your position on this matter evolved since 2015? I know that you opposed it before.
I believe since the Kyoto Protocol, what has happened is that the developed world does not want to live up to its responsibilities. So there's been a shifting or a sharing of the burden now, where everyone has to make pledges. And I dealt with this sometime in the past, where in the Kyoto Protocol, it says common but differentiated responsibilities. Developing countries were not part of the annex that required us to get our emission levels down, because it was recognized that we were low emitters per capita emitters, and even in volume terms, and secondly, we were on a development trajectory. So that over time has evolved into this common undertaking from all countries that is in the Paris Agreement. And so whilst I agree that carbon pricing and cap and trade system, either of the two can be utilized and have been utilized successfully in some countries to lower emission levels, I don't believe that it's obligatory or mandatory for developing countries to do this, small developing countries. And because we're still on a development trajectory. Nevertheless, we should decarbonize our energy sector and the other sectors, because I believe that it brings it has a great impact on our balance of payment and in terms of localized ecosystem impact. So, you know, we can avoid some of the excesses just here. So, like, for example, if we could produce most of our energy from hydropower and now their domestic gas, this would make, we'd have to import less. That is a huge import bill. We spend nearly $500 million US on importing fossil fuel for generation of electricity. And so if you can have that saving on the BOP, then it makes a huge difference to the country.
Mr. Jagdeo, you made mention of this allegation regarding Mr. Ramjatan. Yes. You also said that you've not been able to verify the information that you received as yet. Given that you made this report, would it not have been more prudent to wait for some result out of the investigation before going public, given the impact that this approach is likely to have?
So you could ask that we are doing this because we know our requests to state agencies, unless they're made in the public domain, they go unanswered or unaddressed. We have made several requests to many state agencies for information in several areas, including the sale of land, which should be available to everyone, because that's supposed to be a public process, and they have refused. So we're hoping that the FIU will do this, and you should ask Ramjatan himself. Why not ask him? And I saw he did not respond to the issue, but ask him. He could say no, and welcome the FIU checking it out. He could welcome that, because the same way I suggested to President Granger some years ago that he should hire an international firm to trace the assets abroad held by all current government ministers, all former government ministers, all former presidents, etc. You know, he's refused to do that. Several times I spoke about it at the press conferences. So had that been done, we wouldn't have been in this situation now. And we still renew that call, and we said we will do it. We'll do it for both ministers, the PPP, ministers and MPs and stuff like that, as well as those in APNU, and make it public. Yeah, sure.
Sir, so on what basis are you saying?
Because for me, the information is credible. For me personally. But I would like to get it verified. And I'm prepared to say if it's verified, and he shouldn't have a problem with that too. He shouldn't have a problem with it. So if he is willing, let the FIU look into it. He could say no. And then I'm prepared to say I was wrong.
And have you asked the state agency to
because of, that's why we made a public call on the FIU. I know if we write, what happens.
So a specific report has not been made?
No, but we can make that report. If you think that would help, I will definitely do that today.
But Mr. Jagdeo,
Right? I will make this specific report today. We called on it. We put it in the public domain. The FIU reads too. The President Granger reads. So we can, it's easy to ask Ramjatan. It's easy.
but isn't that the process though, for them to commence investigations for foreign reports?
Okay.
to
No,
be made?
no. The FIU commences investigations without formal request. I'm sure the FIU has been doing a lot of investigations. Here, we can't get a bank account. We can't get, the FIU could get that immediately. They could get this information. It takes a couple of days. They can put this to rest. But I'm so pleased that we want to make sure that we verify allegations before they're made. You know, a lot of allegations have been made without verification. I own mansions in Miami, and I was carried in newspapers. I own the airline and stuff like that. I own the airline. The whole in Queens, a whole block I own in Queens, New York. A ton of allegations too. I'm so pleased that we're going this route now. But I've just made it clear to you. I'm prepared to say I'm wrong, or with the information we received as the PPP is wrong, and if it pans out.
But if he has money in an account in the United States, what is wrong with that?
Oh. The magnitude, and yes, if he has money. No, I'm not saying anything is wrong. I'm just saying, I'm not saying anything else except that what we believe that he has an account there. That is what their party put out, and that it has a large sum of money passed through it in a period when he was being.
Specifically how much?
Just check the news report, the party page, and you will see all. You know what? Ask Ramjatan that. Why don't you ask Ramjatan? Why you ask me now, and I've said all that I can on the matter, what I've done. We are calling on the FIU. Now it's time to call Ramjatan.
He says this is only when he was minister, this money passed.
Yes, that is our information.
All right. Finish that?
Yes.
You said you mentioned that you don't believe that the GNBA can be part of an independent broadcasting monitoring entity going into 2020 elections. Does we plan to take any action, agitation, advocacy at all to prevent this from happening, or is this just a statement of your position?
Yes. I noticed they want to tie up an MOU with they want to volunteer their services to the GCOM. The GCOM should not tie up any arrangements with partisan bodies. GCOM should hire its own media monitor unit and deal with it independently of any of these agencies, staffed by staff and also with boards that are partisan.
But you don't plan
Stop
to do
by
anything
politician.
to push this?
No, I'm not. I just, because he responded to what I said, so I just pointed out that it is, if Mr. Soberbs wants to be judged fairly, then he should also tell us precisely what he has done when you have the character assassination programs on the government stations. And what about the fairness of it now? We're in election mode, and all day long they are in open partisan mode. Not partially, you know, that's understandable. I've always said being incumbent gives you some advantages of, you know, with the state media, etc. And that's acceptable. But it's when they, all day long, they become the propaganda tools of the government.
Mr. Jagdeo,
Yes, sure.
with respect to the election preparations, over the weekend we heard that the Ghana Elections Commission was unable to meet the entire 16,000 plus persons that they wanted to verify. In light of this reality, does the PPP want an extension of time for the verification of the persons who have not been reached. What is the party's position on that?
No, the thing is, they're discussing it today, and so from what we gathered, that of the 16,000 odd names, a significant amount is found the party figures differ from GCOM a bit, but on the whole, over 8,000 were found, and then another 6,000, we're told, are not at home, and then they have a few hundred that never existed. That these are, when the people went, GCOM plus the scrutineers, they found that there are, in these areas, they're empty house lots, etc. Now, that brings me to the point about, for those 100, I hope that stern action is taken against enumerators there who flagrantly try to pad the system for the 100 or so. Now that is the position so far that I've heard. I don't want to be premature because all the data has not, we have not received the data, reconciled the data with GCOM as yet. But what is encouraging for us is that there was a house-to-house verification, and they visited all of the 16,000 odd names. That was good for us. Well, for the country. There is another thing, that nomination day is coming up, and I hope that the chair of GCOM will take stern action, in fact calling the police for people who mislead candidates to go on their list, tell them they're signing up for something else, like what happened in WIM in Nagamutu's area in the local government elections. They fraudulently put people on their list. They told them they were signing up. Some of his relatives and others went around and said they would help them with their pensions if they signed this form. When the people realized that and they went to court, their names could not have been removed because the court rule already gone through the period for objecting. So people who had no association with them ended up being candidates on their list and backers of their list. And so that stern action is taken against, in fact, criminal action is taken against any party that tries to fraudulently put people as candidates or as backers. And it's something I hope the media would follow up, given our experience in the local government elections, where in some areas people became candidates to parties that they never supported.
Mr. Jagdeo, another question. Are you seeing pushback against presidential candidate Mr. Ali? One is one. And two, will we be seeing more of the presidential candidate going to...
So, yes, definitely. And next week there'll be a joint press conference before the end of the year. So you'll get a chance to speak with the candidate too. Yes, so next week you will ask him that, Monday or Tuesday. There'll be a press conference, and you can ask him that directly.
You were not able to say?
No, you will ask him. I prefer he speaks about that. And so Monday, and that's all contrived. This so-called pushback, it's all contrived. It's part of AppNews. It's part of AppNews propaganda. Part of AppNews propaganda. Yes.
Is the PPP prepared to announce its prime ministerial candidate? If not, could you say if anyone other than Brigadier Phillips has been engaged?
No, we have not engaged anyone. I outlined the process. We plan to trigger the process in a matter of probably hours. And I told you that the process involves nominations from the different groups, some are MPs, from the members of the Central Committee, etc. and that once the nominations are in, there'll be intense period of discussion jointly with the MPs and then at the party level, and we'll select a candidate. So we have not received any nomination as yet because we have not triggered the process, but that will be done shortly.
Jagdeo, could you care to say what was the apparent disagreement you had or intense interaction between yourself and the security agents at JFK on December 16th? Apparently, it is alleged that you wanted preferential treatment, passing through the airport back to Diana.
That's another fake news. I didn't even have any issue there. So, in fact, I was first out of the line. I have a diplomatic passport still.
No, on returning, not into the United States. On returning, it is alleged that the TSA agents insisted that you join the line like everyone else.
And I normally, even as president, I did. So that is example of fake news. That is precisely, and Sham Nokta was with me. The two of us were there, and I took some pictures of Guyanese in the line and stuff. I've always, even as president, I use that line. Not like Granger with a big entourage, etc. As president, many times I chose not to use the Secret Service and line up. So it's a normal thing. But the person who told you that is the same, it's either APNU or some of our detractors, maybe some of the AFC people. There was absolutely zero issue. Zero.
And sir, could you react to a congressional think tank that says that basically the elections will be close and most likely Granger will retain power?
We're not going to commend the congressional think tank. We looked at it and we believe differently. We believe that most Guyanese know what will happen, and we are not going to be like paranoid when Ellis said that the PP is likely to win the elections. They went ballistics and they took the whole Chronicle to criticize the guy. We have nothing to criticize the people who wrote this report. And you notice they said unnamed analysts. So I was wondering if there's you have an analyst in your paper too and stuff, if they were quoting these analysts in your thing. So they're free to express an opinion. These are junior staff members, and they didn't name a source. And we know differently. You just walk down the road in Guyana, and 8 out of 10 persons you meet would say to you, we just can't wait for March. They're just fed up. They have absolutely no faith that this government is trustworthy. They've broken their promises. And secondly, that should they win again, they will ever change. They would have no plan. They're incapable. This cabal, this tiny corrupt cabal made up of Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese all they're interested in is a hustle, and a bad hustle.
Sir,
Mr. Jagdeo, on a related question, Mr. Ellis, who said that the PP is likely to win, has also said that one of the laws that the U.S. needs to ensure that the PP, given past concerns about corruption, and here's transparency. I know you've criticized the current administration ad nauseum about corruption, but what concretely can you say the PP will do to address any concerns, whether domestically or particularly by the United States, as it relates to corruption?
So there have been several reversals. Often people who are abroad don't see the reversals. But let me point it out, the one on the Integrity Commission. You know there was a reversal. Every year, whether there was a secretariat, a commission or not, people are obligated to submit their statements, the Integrity Commission statement, by law. This government stopped it for 3 years. We made it clear we will ensure that people, not only for the period going forward, but those 3 years, they would have to submit for the 3 years. We made it clear. So resumption of the Integrity Commission, strengthening the body. Secondly, they have violated the procurement laws. I've given you just one example where the law is explicit about approval of contracts. And this government has approved the contract, moved away from that explicit position that cabinet should not approve contracts, must only give a no objection. And if it withholds the no objection, it has to say why and write the tender board. This government has violated all of the procurement laws. We intend to return to the procurement laws. Thirdly, we spoke about the oil and gas, the concessions, the processing of duty-free concessions. This government has resumed ministerial processing of duty-free concessions. You recall in the last budget, Jordan passed legislation to say that you can now go to him and he can waive your VAT or the penalties associated with VAT. None of that never happened under the PPP. We remove the right to process concessions. When I was Minister of Finance at that time, we inherited a system where the minister used to sign the duty-free letters. We changed that and we said GRA must process it. It's all enshrined in the law, what you're eligible for. They returned to ministerial processing. We said we'll return to a technical processing of duty-free concession. That's the third element. On oil and gas, we made it clear that every Guyanese must know every cent that we collect. And that is why we plan to criminalize non-disclosure. And the Minister of Finance can go to jail for 10 years by not disclosing any sum of money within a short period and gazette that we receive from oil companies. I can go through a long list of issues. We remember the privatization. We published every privatization done between 1992 and 2011 in a booklet. Who, how, what, prices, etc. This government has been privatizing things. They have stopped using the privatization board now. We had the unit, then it goes to the board, the privatization board. The board used to have 3 members from civil society, labor, private sector, and consumer affairs. They now go from unit, and the NISIL makes all the decision on its own. It used to go unit, board, cabinet. That was the process we used. We have to return to that with the oversight over privatization and publication of how it's done. There are hundreds of things that we need to do that we can do to strengthen or to even go back to what we had, even go back. And then in terms of strengthening, we made it clear that we are going to pass campaign finance legislation. We want to strengthen the Access to Information Act to create a body that is, people can get information quickly, so from the commissioner, and we want to pass campaign finance legislation. So those are ways that you can also strengthen accountability.
Mr. Jagdeo, but how do you see, I hear the list that you've outlined here, but how do you guard against perceptions in the past of kickbacks and sweetheart deals, which are not necessarily found using these kinds of rules?
But Dennis, you perfectly said perceptions. And this is one way of, we have to tackle issues frontally. When Gulsaran said that in his assessment, 28 to 35 billion Guyana dollars was lost every year from procurement, public procurement. Immediately, APNU put it in the manifesto. They said that throughout. This was a fact. Ask Gulsaran how he came up with the figure. Not a single media house said, can you tell us which projects? This is per year, 25 to 38 billion a year. The perception became a reality because many media houses and others did not interrogate these figures. This can't only be for the politicians. That's why I wish people were so, like how you were asking about Ramjatan now, that they had interrogated those figures and the same assertions and allegations in the PPP period. So those are some of the things we have to tackle frontally, so that the perception that APNU played on a lot doesn't become like a fact and get written about, that you tackle it openly, frontally. Thank you.